and welcome to tonight's edition of The Lounge. How's everybody doing tonight? Are you guys feeling the absolute crazy shift in energy that has happened over the last 2 days? If you are completely like, oh my God, for the last 6 weeks, everything has been so slow moving, so turbulent on the inner emotional level. Uh, Everybody's been having a lot of old wounds come up, emotions, uh, old karmic stuff coming up, and now it's like all of a sudden, it's like a greyhound out of the gate, like the gate open, and it's like boom, all this stuff's going on, and you're just like, I cannot handle this going from all this slow motion energy to just going so fast. It's like you can't really keep up. So hopefully everything is going to kind of settle down as we move along into the week. I know when there's a shift in energy with transitions, especially going into the warmer weather or kids getting out of school or transitions in your life, when it comes to changes like this, you have to be able to allow your body, your mind, and your spirit to kind of grieve and process those transitions and changes. Kind of like if you think about moving from one house to the other, you're so engrossed in packing and moving and the trucks and boxes that you're not actually processing the transition in between, and that stays in your body. So you have to be able to process this seasonal transition. Ani M is on. She's saying, "Tell me about it." Exactly. So this is like you're going to the amusement park, and I know for me, I go to the amusement park. I like have to start off with the slow rides and then make my way up to like the big roller coaster, right? It's like the energy. What it's doing now is it's like taking us from the lazy river to like the craziest ride in the park. All of a sudden, that's what it feels like. So yeah. Uh Maria, good evening, everyone. You're feeling overwhelmed. Things move very fast. Yeah, I understand. Hi, Stephen. How are you? Hi, Eileen. Good to see you guys. Well, we have a show for you tonight. Let me just tell you. So, if you're feeling like a little bit like things are moving so fast, we're going to slow it down tonight. A lot of you have been writing in asking for a show on past lives. Uh, bring on a guest on past lives. So, I don't, I did, I think I did a good job. I didn't just bring on one person, we're bringing on two people connected to past lives. And I'm interested to see what they have to say. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about them. Hi, Sandy. Good to see you also. And I'd like to invite you guys to post your questions in the comments. We will get to them tonight. I know with our other series, our near death experience series, sometimes it's hard to get to them till after the show because those are such intense interviews. But tonight, feel free to ask about past lives. What do you want to know about them? What are you interested in? Did you have any experiences? We're going to find, and if you have a specific question about past lives, very, very interesting. And here we have Dr. Marnie. Hi, Dr. Marnie. Dr. Marnie was on last week. She says, always great to tune into your shows. So glad to learn more about past lives. If you'd love to see Dr. Marnie's show from June 3rd, you guys could just scroll down on the Facebook page and take a look at Dr. Marnie's show and her book, God Came to My Garage Sale, and about spiritually transformative experiences. So thank you, Dr. Marnie, for coming back and tuning in. All right, let me tell you about our guests for tonight. So our guest, the title of the show, it is what it is, The Gift of Past Lives, right? So, I should have asked Dave how to pronounce his last name because I don't like saying people's last names incorrectly. So I'm going to take a shot at it. But Dave, when you get on, feel free to say, Marissa, you really screw that up. Dr. David Bettenhausen and his former office manager, Carla Bogni-Kidd, I don't know if I said that correct, had a spiritual experience leading them to discover not one past life together. Because you know how some of us, we meet people who are like, we've known you from a past life. No, this led them to discover not one, but 29 past lives together. Cats have 9 lives. They had 29. They now share the message. Love is always the answer. And that's what we hear from our NDE experiencers too. They come back from dying, basically going to heaven, coming back and saying, God said love's the answer. Kindness is the answer. And this is what they're saying. So we're going to go over a couple different topics tonight. Number one, soul groups. You guys want to know about soul groups and why we return with them to the earth plane. The 5 simple rules for living and how to get off the karmic wheel. So if you're repeating patterns, you're trying to get off that wheel, we'll talk about that. What can we learn from past lives? Can you heal current life problems by learning about your past lives? That's very interesting. And what is the purpose of coming to earth? So without further ado, let me just turn our music down while we bring our guests on. And I would like to give a warm welcome to the show, and Lounge, feel free to give a warm welcome to Carla and Dave, the gift of past lives. How are you guys doing tonight?
We're doing fantastic, Marissa. It's a pleasure to be on.
We're great, so Marissa. You did great on the names.
The names were good enough. Okay. Yeah, it's perfect.
Well, that's good. I is now Carla. Is that an Italian last name, Bogni?
It's an Italian last name, and you did pretty good with the Italian pronunciation. The Americanized version is Bogni-Kidd, but you did the Italian version perfectly.
Okay, good, because I did take Italian, and I am Italian. So, and I did go to Italy. So I'm like, okay. I know that GN, and it's a roll. It's a roll over there.
Yes. Yep.
So I am very interested in how you guys got together. But first, I'm going to go to Dave and then Carla. Dave, tell me about your life prior to all these crazy experiences. Were you just like a normal guy, like running around doing normal life stuff? Or were you always kind of like you were born interested in more?
So, Marissa, for me, this was a 180-degree turn over everything that I believed, thought. I think I've probably always been a nice guy. I was a nurse, went back to medical school, tried to work hard, take good care of patients and those kind of things. Was raised Catholic.
Okay.
I'll let Carla do something.
I always have had a questioning mind. Growing up, I was raised Catholic. And then when my parents divorced, my mother converted to Mormonism. And then with my first marriage, I became Methodist. So I questioned everything. Those 3 religions did not squelch my appetite. I had been to psychics and mediums, and I had done a little bit of meditation, but the Catholic upbringing, said, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. You'll conjure up bad things. So I stopped doing it until this all happened.
Yes, until our experience. Which
go ahead. That is strange because I grew up Catholic too, and I've had some experiences based on some religious experiences, and there are conservatives in the Catholic religion. There's also a lot of liberals and secrets that, what I found from talking to people that were in different aspects of Catholicism that they do believe, but they won't tell you that they do. You know what I mean?
So, it's interesting if you use the word Christian, 20% of Christians believe in reincarnation if you actually ask them.
Okay.
And it sort of doesn't work to be Christian 100% and believe in past lives, because why would you get more than one chance if Jesus's death suddenly answers all the questions? Okay. And so that's why it was kind of a shock to me when this experience happened to us.
So before you guys got together, did you even know what the term past lives were? Were you guys aware of what the term was?
Well, I had read all of Dr. Brian Weiss's books.
Yes.
And, for those who don't know about Dr. Brian Weiss, he was a prominent psychiatrist who was doing some hypnotism on some patients that he believed had problems in this life related to earlier in their life. And he went beyond the early life to a past life. And of course, he didn't believe it, and he kept doing it and brought in all other types of psychiatrists that did it with him. And so he's very well known in the reincarnation past life field. So I did know about those things. Dave wasn't closed-minded. He just, wasn't out searching. He was keeping his head above water with 2 unhappy marriages.
Yes. Okay, so both of you, and so I'm assuming we won't go here right now, but I'm assuming there were some probably past life connections to some of those other marriages as well. We don't have to go back there. So fast forward, you guys tell me about your story. Tell me about your love story. Tell me about how you guys got together and where this spiritual kind of explosion, I would say, because I feel that you haven't said this to me, but I feel there was like a boom moment between the two of
Yeah.
you.
There, there,
So,
there really was. In 1998, Dave bought the practice where I was the office manager, and so we became instant friends. And in 2014, the office was very stressed. The government had implemented electronic medical records. We were used to using a computer very little bit. We were doing charts and pens and paper, and it was really stressful. And Dave, who is normally a cross between Yogi Bear and Fred Flintstone, was totally unapproachable. And I couldn't talk to him, and I felt so bad about it. And I said, Dave, should I call a counselor? And he said, no, he just ignored it. And then one morning I was reading in AARP magazine, All the Benefits of Meditation. And the benefits are so vast, and Dave will go into it for you, that I took it in and I said to Dave, what do you think about this? What if we meditate as an office? We all need stress relief. We had a small medical office. And I thought, well, we could all do it as, an office together. And Dave said, okay. And talk about the benefits just a little.
So a couple interesting things. The physician in me always tries to look at something to see if I can find something that seems to matter. And the first thing people need to know is the first year that I meditated, I lost 104 pounds.
what? Wait, okay, stop. I have to stop there. I have to stop.
Yep.
That's incredible. Now, when you say you bought a practice, you said you went to nursing school. So did you
I
become
went to nursing school, and after 10 years of working as an open heart nurse, I went back to medical school.
So you became a medical doctor and opened up
Right.
your own practice. So you were now a physician.
Correct.
Yes.
What kind of physician were you?
Oh, I'm actually a podiatrist,
Okay.
so a foot doctor.
Okay.
Okay.
So now that I have to get clear on that. So you were overweight
Oh, yeah. I weighed 325 pounds.
at the time that you were doing your practice. And so
Yep.
when Carla was talking about you having this feeling like she wanted to call a counselor, were you in a period of depression at that time?
Probably.
Yes. Certainly, I was having issues related to a failing marriage, and then this whole issue with the starting electronic medical records. Literally, I was working 14 hours a day and forgot the rest of the world.
Okay. So you were just like, you feeling like your purpose was just squashed and just like, is this all there is? And feeling like this is a day in and day out drain on your energy.
Mhm.
Correct.
Okay. So, all right. So then you got the AARP magazine and you're like, hey, I'm going to try this meditation thing.
Right.
Mhm.
And it was great because literally when we went to electronic medical records, I was staring at either my cell phone or this computer screen 12 or 14 hours a day, trying to see the same number of patients, adding on this new technology. To start with, most physicians hated it because we were staring at a computer screen instead of looking at our patients and doing things.
Right.
And so I was getting very burned out. And so even the very first day, Carla said this, I said, well, I'll try anything. And I didn't want to go to a counselor and admit that I wasn't fulfilling my purpose in life or whatever.
Right. Like you just knew that you felt like crap.
I felt like crap.
Yeah.
I'm a doctor, and we never admit that doctors have any problems.
Right. Because you're supposed to be the strength for everybody else.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so that first day, she lit a little candle and played some really wonderful little calming music. And for 30 minutes, right before the patients came on, we just shut all the technology off. And I felt great. Jumped up, went down the hall. It was great. The next day, we talked about it a little.
Well, the first day we all said, oh, it's so difficult to shut your mind off. The second day, we all saw colors, bursts of colors. And we thought, well, that must be normal. And then the third day, the other girls in the office, well, we don't want to come in at 7:30. We'll do it at home. So Dave and I decided to do it ourselves. And we did for about 35 minutes. And then we heard the patients coming in. So we got up, went to our adjoining office, and Dave came up behind me and he said, Carla, I know you'll think I'm crazy, but I think I was just talking to your mother. And I said,
whoa.
What? Now, I was open to this, but I was thinking, why is my mother coming to you? My mother died 18 years before and you never met her. So I said, well, what do you mean? What did she say? And he said, well, she was really jovial and she kept showing me this shoe. And I said, wait a minute. I went over to the computer. I Googled ballroom dancing shoes. And I brought up maybe 60 or 70 pair. I said, which one? And he pointed to the exact ballroom dancing shoe my mother wore her entire life. Short pump, open-toed sandals. She wore it for church, dress up, and ballroom dancing. How could he possibly have gotten that? So we had an aha moment, and my sister was also working in the office, and she had arrived, and she heard this. She went back, got her purse, brought a picture of my mother up, turned it to Dave and said, is this who you were speaking with? And Dave got really emotional. He said, yes. So from there, all we wanted to do was sit and meditate. We didn't want to take care of patients. We just wanted to meditate all day.
Yeah. So,
yeah. Wow.
So to finish the little meditation story, I did a lot of research after that. And so a couple things that are important to everybody here is, first of all, the relaxation that occurs during meditation actually decreases cortisol in the body, which is that hormone that's a stress hormone that makes you retain weight.
You know what? I was going to ask you, I was going to say, you know what? I bet you lost weight because you reduced your cortisol.
Absolutely. And the weight just started to fall off. I was losing, and at the time I said, I think I could lose a couple pounds a week. And a year later, I was 104 pounds lighter.
Were you like worried that like something was wrong with you because like you're just losing weight? Like, were you worried as a physician, like, oh, something must be wrong?
I really wasn't.
He was happier.
Yeah. I was thrilled already. And then, the more research, it actually lowers blood sugar, lowers blood pressure. It increases dopamine and serotonin, which are the medicines we give people if they're depressed.
Yeah.
And so
helps you sleep.
It helps you sleep because it increases melatonin. So I was like, gosh, this meditation thing is great. Besides, something has happened that proves to me that there's an afterlife because I've met Carla's mother.
I have to stop. I have to ask you because this is what I do. You were having evidential mediumship in one. It's like I have to teach people. Go through technical aspects to actually train people how to do this, right?
Right.
And you were having aspects of what I can see as very technical evidential mediumship experience from 30 minutes of meditation, which is incredible.
It's not fair, is it?
It must be that you brought this in from a past life, because you already know how to do it.
Yeah, it just happened. Now, to keep telling part of the story, it's interesting because we had that experience, and a few days later, I had another experience. And in the next experience, I had a memory from this life in 1962 when I was 3 years old. And in 1962, I lived in Nebraska where my dad was a teacher. He was going back to graduate school. And we got in this little blue sedan and we drove all the way across the country to Boston. I'm telling Carla and Paula this story after I remember it during meditation. And they go, when were you in Boston? Because they grew up in Boston. And so I'm telling the story, and I remembered married student housing and this little lady that I bothered for cookies. And I remembered going to a beach in Boston. And I started telling them about the beach. I said, there's a Ferris wheel in the background and a big roller coaster. There's a long row of souvenir shops. You cross this road and you go to the beach. And I remember running on this beach. And while I'm running on the beach, this little girl runs up and yells at me and tells me to be quiet. I'm bothering her family. She pushes me down. She sits on my chest. She gives me a kiss on the forehead. And while I'm getting this kiss on the forehead, I hear a woman in the background say, Carla, that's not how little girls act. So this little girl jumps up, puts both hands on her hips. She's wearing this little blue 2-piece ruffled bathing suit. And I'm looking up, and Carla looks at me and says, my God, Dave.
That was me.
Yeah.
And I didn't need to meditate to remember it. I was the youngest of 6 girls, good Catholic family, parents should have gotten divorced, but didn't. They kept breaking up and getting back together. We were not well off. That particular day, Daddy rented 2 cabs and we went to Revere Beach. And as Dave talked about this beach, my sister and I both knew exactly which one it was because it had an amusement park with it. It was Revere Beach. And that day, when we got there, for whatever reason, I didn't have my bathing suit. And I normally would have inherited one of my sisters. So we went across the street, all 7 of us. And my parents, who really couldn't afford it, bought me my first brand new blue ruffled 2-piece bathing suit. It was etched in my memory like forever.
And you were like, do you feel like that was her mother showing you a memory?
I think so. I think it was meant to give us
More validation,
more
probably.
validation,
Yeah,
more information. And I'm like, we're looking at each other going,
I never knew you lived in Boston. It was weird.
it was very strange, a very strange experience. And so we just kept going to meditate, and we saw strange things, and I saw little pictures and
faces.
And Carla started writing little things down, everything that I saw. And then there was a day where I had another memory, and it was so incredibly vivid. And I was standing in this dark alley, and I was looking across the alley, and there was Carla. She was standing there. Now, I'm going to tell you, I knew it was Carla. She didn't look exactly like Carla. Her hair was shorter, shorter than it was then. Now it's probably closer to the length it is now.
Yeah.
But she had short blonde hair. She was very young. She had a little gold band on her ruffled skirt.
No, fringe.
Fringed skirt, yes. and as I'm looking at her, I see 2 flashes. I hear a bang, and I'm hit in the chest, and I realize I've been shot. And I fall down, and I know I'm dying in this dark alley.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what is amazing is the next day when we meditated, I saw more of the story. And I was getting into a little car, and I was driving to Ashland Auditorium in Chicago, Illinois. And I was going to the wedding of a man named Angelo. And as I went into the wedding and sat with a friend of mine at the wedding, I knew Angelo was a customer that came into our bank where I worked. And as I'm sitting there at the wedding singer walks out, and it's the woman that I saw in the alley. And she sings the Ave Maria, and it's beautiful. And as I'm standing there, I'm like, I have got to meet her.
Wait, I'm trying to go between visions and real life.
Yes.
So is this wedding singer, is this like you're there in real life?
It feels like I'm there in real life.
But you're not really.
No, I'm sitting in my office.
Okay.
Meditating.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
And so when the wedding is over, I get up and I go to the reception and I meet the wedding singer. And I ask her, because I keep pestering her, to go out to breakfast with me the next day. And she does. And the next day, the memory comes in. And I meet her for breakfast, and we take a walk along the Chicago coastline. And she tells me her name is Ruby Donaldson, and she's from Bullock, Georgia, and that she moved to Chicago to become a singer and a dressmaker. And that she works for this man named Angelo, who owns a speakeasy.
Okay. So this is all in meditation.
All during meditation. It's cold. We're walking along the shoreline. Carla is incredible, and she runs with this information.
Okay.
Well, I'm not so incredible. Unlike everybody else, I'm curious.
Right,
right. Thought, well, that wasn't that long ago. Maybe I could get proof. So I went on to Ancestry.com. And of course, who would think Ruby Donaldson was a very popular name during that time? But I did find Ruby Donaldson, born in 1904, to James and Anna Donaldson from Bullock, Georgia, one of 11 children. There were pictures of my parents, pictures of some of the children. And then I got onto another site with newspapers, and I found the wedding of Angelo Genna to Lucille Spinola, January the 10th, 1925. Ashland Auditorium in Chicago. They had over 3,000 mobsters there. And the reason it was an Ashland auditorium is because they didn't have a church large enough to host all of those mobsters. They had a 10-foot tall wedding cake. There was a picture of that. So I called Dave and I said, well, you're not crazy. I found corroborating information, you know?
And then the next aha moment during meditation was...
You should tell her in between that Isabella surfaced.
That's what I'm telling her
All
right now.
Yeah.
Okay. So another woman that I met during meditation kept appearing to me, and she told me her name was Isabella. And Isabella said, I've been with you for 6,000 years. And
but
I'm
this
like,
wasn't the wedding singer. This is
no,
different.
this was not. This was
During meditation.
During meditation.
Okay.
That she's told me that I'm your spirit guide and I have been with you for 6,000 years through all of your incarnations. Now, the little Catholic boy that I was raised as thought, okay, I've really lost my mind.
Right.
You should have sent me to a counselor because I'm psychotic. I have some sort of strange experiences going on. People are talking in my head while I meditate. There's something wrong with me. Well, we kept documenting everything that Isabella would say, every memory that I had. Soon I would meditate and Carla would ask questions, and we didn't really realize till years later when we actually went and trained with Dr. Weiss in past life regression.
Oh, wow. You did? You went and met Brian
Yeah.
Weiss?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, my goodness.
And so when we trained with him, we realized that during part of these meditations, Carla would be asking questions. And I didn't realize that in some of this, meditation is really almost a form of self-hypnosis. And the questions she was asking, I was answering, or Isabella would answer. And when we were going through all that, we ended up with 42 lives for me.
Confirmed by
Isabella. And 34 for Carla. And 29 of them we had shared experiences in. Not always as emotional or love interests, but she had been my mother, my sister, my next door neighbor, many times my wife, many times a love interest. I was shot in an alley, so I didn't end up with Ruby. But
don't tell the story.
I'm not telling the rest of the story. But we found all these experiences, and it was really interesting because since we had all of them chronologically, and Isabella kept giving us, I kept going back and seeing more of the story and more of the story, that we were getting incredible details. We know our children, when we were born,
our astrological sign, what we died from,
all of that in all of these lives, and at least bits of all of these lives that we could start to piece things together. Things like we had a life as a Viking life where we landed on the Scottish soil. In the next life, we were Scottish fighting the English. In the next life, we were English fighting the Scottish. And in the next life, Carla comes back and is married into the English royalty, but she's of Danish and Viking descent. Because we lived on the same or opposite the same war sometimes. It was very strange. And then we started looking through other things and we found things. Go ahead.
How else can you learn compassion if you don't live on all sides of everything? So if we live on one side, we think we're, not the enemy. We think the other person is the enemy. And then in our next life, we're actually the enemy. So we're never really the enemy. And there's never really a winner or loser because everybody loses. You're just taking turns on all sides so that you'll learn compassion and learn to love.
Yeah. And so we've looked through this, and of course, we've been slave and slave owner. We've been rich and poor. We've been simple people or landowners.
We've been saints and sinners.
all of the above. We've been to war as a Catholic during the Inquisitions, and we've been Muslim and Jewish, to the point where we start to realize that when we look at our experiences spread out over all these lives, we've lived on both sides of everything or many things, so that we can understand that we're never really right or wrong, correct or incorrect. And this is when Isabella started to come in and said, it's really a lot easier than you think. It's all about ego and love. And those things that are the ego are conceit, selfishness, jealousy, and unforgiveness. And everything else is a choice you would make out of love and compassion. And she says, and those are really the 5 simple rules. If you make every decision, or stop and ask yourself to try to make the decision a loving decision, then you don't develop the need or the karma to live on the other side of this issue, because you've already learned that compassion and love is really the only answer.
It's so interesting that you're talking about this because, as many people, as you guys all know, you watch in the lounge every week, we're doing the near death experience series, and people, are dying and coming back and telling us what these lessons are. And it's the same stuff that you're saying with your experiences. It is the small acts of kindness. It is compassion. It's not these big, huge, monumental things. It's love, kindness, empathy, compassion. And
Right. And
that's
it's,
what you're saying.
yeah. And Marisa, it's really interesting because this has brought us to look through lots of different things. And of course, there's a lot of research out there on children who have spontaneous past life memories. But started to piece all these things together. If I look at the experience that people who have near-death experiences have, they talk about unrelenting love. They talk about time seems to not be the same. They talk about spirit beings or beings of light, love all around them. They meet their loved ones. We have memories between lives now. And some of that memory between life includes beings of light, meeting our loved ones, having a past life review. And a lot of people during NDEs have a past life review. The experiences that people with past life regression have and or our spontaneous memories have are some of the same experiences that those people with near-death experiences. And when they've researched now about 2,500 kids at the Department of Conceptual Studies at University of Virginia, and they're cataloging these kids that they've kind of been able to look at the memory, and they've been able to say that they believe that these kids were the same person in another life. Those kids have some intermission memories, and they're all the same too. They talk about beings of light, meeting their loved ones, all those kind of things. And it's really interesting with these kids because they'll say, I remember so-and-so. And they lived in so and such a town in a blue house. And they take the kids back and they meet people and they know their name.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
or there's a real famous one where there's a kid who believed he was a fighter pilot, and he was on an aircraft carrier, and he knew the name of the aircraft carrier, and he knew the name of the plane that he was flying in, and he knew that he died off the coast of Japan.
Yes, I did see a documentary on that.
And the
Fascinating.
parents went looking, and they found the roster with him on it, on that boat
Yeah,
and that plane, and it did. And his is the only plane that crashed.
that's right.
And you can't teach a 3-year-old those kind of facts.
No, and it's interesting. I just have to tell you a little bit about my mediumship work that I've done over the years. Midway, somebody would be coming through, and somebody lost their mother or father, or somebody close to them, and they'd come through and they'd show me a baby, and they say, baby's ready to come in, and they're waiting, and they have the baby. They're holding the baby. I could see the sex of the baby. I could see how many pounds the baby's going to be. I could see the personality of the baby. And I
Mhm.
said, wait a minute. This has happened many, many times to me where the loved one, because, a baby's born, you're like, oh, I wish my mom knew the baby or dad, and if the baby's in the back, I knew the baby already passed. But when they show it forward, it means they're sending one down. So then
Mhm.
I'm realized this is a circle. Our children are over there before they come here. So
Mhm.
it's not just
Correct.
like earth and heaven and it's like a one-way ticket. It's a circle,
It's
Mhm.
a circle. And
you know?
that's what we've discovered. And so our first book was The Gift of Past Lives, and we share about 20 past lives. Our second book is Hell No Reincarnation. And we talk a little bit about the children research, and then we talk a little bit about religion.
And 7 more past life
And
stories.
7 more past lives are in that book. And it's even interesting because in about 200 AD, so that's 200 or 170 years after Jesus, even the Catholic Church was still teaching transmigration of the soul and the pre-existence of the soul before time, before this life, and existence after this life.
Right.
And the man who was writing most of that was one of the early church leaders. His name was Origen. He was from Alexandria, Egypt, but he was actually excommunicated from the church 200 years after his death because that teaching didn't match the Jesus story. If Jesus dies for everybody's sin, why would you need to come back? And so as it sort of started to change the way I looked at a lot of things, and Carla looked at a lot of things, Catholic didn't match anything that seemed real
Mm.
after having this experience.
It's funny because the NDE interviews I've been doing, a lot of the people who had the NDEs that I've been interviewing have had an experience with Jesus or seek Jesus.
Mhm.
And he would say, do you want to go back or do you want to stay? So it's like, it's so a lot of these people had a choice to come back or to stay, you know?
Also, if you read enough of them, Marisa, I've also found that statistically, most of the people said it was so beautiful and loving that they didn't want to return, but they had to.
Right. Yeah.
So it means part of them didn't get a choice.
But yeah, some of them did not. You're right. Some of them did not, but some of them did. So it's just interesting what I've been hearing, and for me, the depth of which Catholicism goes for me is because I've talked to people that were not just Catholic priests. I've talked to people who are missionaries, in Haiti,
Right.
and different orders of the Catholic, and it goes a lot deeper. The mysticism does go a lot deeper than
Mhm.
what
Correct.
people will tell you. So there is a depth there. It's just that, the general public really, it's kind of covered up.
Correct. And
Yeah.
if you look back at religious history, you find that 33% of the world's population still believes in reincarnation. It's not
Mm.
very popular in the United States because we don't have a high percentage of Buddhists or a high percentage of Hindu here. And Jewish people are a relatively small percentage. However, reincarnation is an actual tenet of Judaism.
I didn't know that.
Yep. And in fact, some of the rabbis that I've tried to read about, they talk about the 613 mitzvahs they're supposed to do. And they say that part of their theory is that if you haven't done all of the things you're supposed to do, you'll have to return until you complete all 613. Also,
613, is that a specific number?
that's the number of mitzvahs. Now you could do,
Okay.
which is sort of like commandments, the broad 10 commandments spread way out. And so, you might do 20 mitzvahs very easy because you are a good person and you took care of your kids and you got married and never divorced and did all the, so those things, but it could take many lives to get them all done.
Mm-hmm.
And let's
So
face it, if you mess with anybody's core beliefs, it's really difficult for somebody to change their mind if you're raised in a certain religion, just
right.
like your father bought a Chevy, you buy a Chevy. Your parent was a Democrat, so you're a Democrat. You were raised Catholic, so that you stay Catholic. And it's really hard to change your beliefs, especially in the USA, where people are very close-minded and we're all raised in fear. And that's the problem with a lot of religions. They raise us in fear. The God we know and the Jesus we know, there is no fear. There's nothing to be afraid of. There is no hell and there's no fear. It's just
those people with the near-death experiences didn't come back scared that they were going back to hell. Most of them.
I mean, there are some that did. I mean, that I've heard of, that I've interviewed, that said that
Right.
they have been there. How do you feel about the people they say that had those more darker experiences?
Well, we've asked Isabella about that, and she said two things. She said, if you've had a past life, suppose you were one of the people persecuted by Nero, and you actually burned in fires. That's in your memory bank. And if you're in fear, or you're very open at the moment that you're having your near-death experience, that could surface. And if you were raised in fear to believe in a devil, the red guy with the little tail that's going to come and swoop you up and take you down to hell, and you're in fear, you might just let your mind go run, away with you, as Dave always talks about the experiences that we know and we share.
So here's Marisa, this is important, because this is another thing that Isabella said. And all religion is usually talking about love of God, creator, source, Tao, Brahman, whatever their term is. If it's about love, she says you can't love and fear at the same time.
Okay,
And
yeah,
so
let's get into that a little bit.
Okay.
Yes.
So that's really an important issue. If God or source or the collective, or there's so many terms that people talk about this, if you are created to return and you were created in love and you're meant to love, you can't be coerced by a threat, because that's not really love. And so if the threat is to go to hell, as most religions do, that's not love. Love has to be given freely. That's why we're given free will here. That's why we get to make choices. However, every choice has a consequence. And the consequence may be that you have another lesson to learn. That's loosely called karma by most people. But it's really a set of positive and negative experiences. And another thing people always ask me is, why don't you remember everything? This is another partly science and physician related comment, but every experience that we have in this world is shared into our subconscious. And every one of them is recorded as a positive and a negative experience. Example, if you burn yourself, the second time you touch something hot, you pull back faster. Each past life can work the same way. If all of this is saved into your soul consciousness, into that subconscious layer, if Ruby and JJ are standing in a dark alley again, I'm going to be worried because I could be shot. So I'm going to avoid the dark alley in my next life, or I'm going to avoid the selfish tendency that got me into that alley in the next life, because those memories are still inside me, still recorded in the subconscious, still following me life to life.
Deja vu.
Example, deja vu. You meet somebody and you say, I've met them and I love them already.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Okay. Or I've met them and I'm very uncomfortable.
Uh-huh.
And that really gets you to this point, which we talk about as soul families. We return with the same group of people over and over. Carla and I have found many of the people in our lives in our past lives. And one of the lessons from Isabella is that we return in soul groups as two different types of groups. We return as soul family to help each other, or as a karmic mate to literally test each other. And the goal, of course, for everyone is to all become soul family. So once you undo the karma with someone, they may become part of your soul family and return in a positive way down the line.
And I should tell you that Ruby's boss in the 1925 life, Angelo, was my first husband in this life.
So are you Ruby?
Yep.
Okay. And so we didn't even talk about your love story. Well, first, I have another question that I've been waiting to ask, and then I'll talk about that.
Okay.
What about suicide
All
in
right.
past lives? I'm
Okay.
interested because a lot of people have lost people like that here tonight and in our audience. And it seems like they're not completing. I mean, are they not completing what they're supposed to do, or
Right.
where?
Isabella
What is that?
says the first thing you do when you answer this question, Isabella says, is remind people that yes, we miss them and we miss our loved ones, but we're all eternal. So any one slight bit of time and moment is not the end. So suicide doesn't mean you go to hell.
Mm-hmm.
Suicide means that you, or murdering someone else, whether you murder yourself or you murder someone else, you've shortened their chance to learn a lesson. And so whatever lesson they were meant to learn, they're going to have to repeat.
And come back to the earth plane, or learn it up and or learn it in the other in heaven.
They may learn it in heaven too. There is some potential there. Some people have learned enough lessons, potentially even if they had committed suicide, that they could be given a job in heaven. So you may help as a guide for someone else. Now, an actual spirit guide has never had a life, but you may be given a guide. You may become someone's gatekeeper to help protect them from spirits that want to influence the world they're coming back to, and etc. So they may take, or they may become an animal guide in heaven or the spirit realm.
While we were writing the first book, Marissa, my girlfriend's fiance of 15 years committed suicide. He hung himself and she found him. And the first question she had for me is, what's happening to him? You know, is he in trouble? Is he going to hell? And after 3 days, Dave was able to speak with him. And he just said that he was in prison. He felt like he was imprisoned because he was in his time of atonement before you go through your life review.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he realized what he did was selfish and negative, but that yet he understood it and knew that he was coming back again. He is back again. Every time somebody commits suicide, it's not always just a selfish, vengeful act. Sometimes it's because somebody's so depressed,
Mm-hmm.
they think it's the only way out. But religion has taught us that, oh, that's the ultimate sin and we're going to hell. And that's not the case. God doesn't do that. Committing suicide or murder is just the same negative effect or response as, burning down your neighbor's house or purposely causing grief for somebody. Those are all negative behaviors that we all answer for in one way or another, but it's not that you're doomed to hell and you never get another chance.
Right.
That's part of the love is always the answer, is God, source, creator, Tao, whatever. There needs to be both divine justice and mercy for love to exist. So God is, of course, going to forgive you, whatever the transgression. And there's some very horrible, evil transgressions, and you're going to get another chance. Because the spirit of love is that in which you were created believes that you have the potential to reach that state of love again. And you're going to rotate through these lives again and again until you reach them. Now, I'm going to tell you a really quick story which has to do with Carla's mother who passed. She took a job being our gatekeeper, meaning that spirits waiting to return that wanted to leave negative messages. And again, I mentioned this sort of, somebody may want to, as they're getting ready to come back, reach out and influence the world they're going to return to. And they may not be all positive because they're having to come back into the world, and it's not always fun here. So she took that job where she was protecting us, knowing that she potentially could have to return from that job to another life. And God approached her and said, "You're done, Cindy. You don't have to go back. You're going to go what we call over the horizon to a place where it's all loving, where there are no wants or needs. You're done." And she said, "I can't go now. Dave and Carla need me to protect them." And he said, "Isn't that the point? You've actually been completely selfless, and you're going to risk going back to Earth to protect your children."
But I should preface that, Marisa, by saying in this life, my parents finally did get divorced. My mother finally did leave my father, but she left him with all of us because she couldn't afford to take us. That was a long time ago when women, just couldn't go out and get a job and pay for everything. So part of that was her selfishness. So she had to learn, as being our gatekeeper, she was taking care of us all of the time, protecting us from, for instance, like I had a very negative grandmother that popped in one day on me, and my mother just said, "Nope, get away," because they can do that to protect you. So up there, when she finally learned the lesson and she said to God, "What will I do? I have to leave now?" God said, basically, "You got it. You graduated.
You get the lesson. So you can learn once you're there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fascinated by everything you're saying because it all makes so much sense. And then I kind of try to compare it in my mind to what I see when I do my work. And there's so many there's not just one level. There's not just heaven. I see so many different levels of existence for spirits based on where they are in their evolution. And so with suicides, it's not 100% all the time, but there is a realm where, people that have committed suicide usually go to kind of try to heal from certain things to kind of move to that next place.
Yeah. So Marisa, we in our third book, which is the manual, we actually talk about 7 planes or vibrational levels or whatever you would like to call each one of those.
There's a color chart.
And there's a color chart that shows it, but it talks about the earth plane. It talks about plane 2, which is really the atonement plane where you wait to come back. It talks about level 3, which is where everybody goes for their past life review, where they meet a council of 12 and God or Jesus or Muhammad or someone will usually attend, which tries to help people learn through their past life lessons. Level 4 is this place where people go that are helping people on earth, but they may return from there, even though they may have been a guide for somebody. Angels and spirit guides. Your animals all live on that same plane. Plane 5 is that place we call over the horizon. And plane 6 is very interesting from Isabella's point of view. People talk about soulmates. She says plane 6 is actually soulmates. It's a place where 2 people are asked after they've died that no longer have to come back if they're willing to use their joint love and energy to be a beacon of love to help draw more people to heaven.
Those people have had many lives together. They're not necessarily male and female. They can be any gender, but they emulated love in their lives together. So upon their death, separately, God will ask them, "Would you like to be a soulmate?"
Interesting. I
And
find
then
that so fascinating.
and then the seventh level you would call God or creator.
Hmm.
And what Isabella says is when the last soul is done, this will all collapse to one. And it
To
will
one
all be
dimension. Yeah,
into
yeah.
one dimension, and the dimension will be even and equal with God.
Right. I guess I do have some more questions for you guys, and we're already. I mean, this went by so fast. It's like it's kind of crazy. Um, I notice when I do the mediumship, if a spirit is earthbound, they look a certain way, meaning that they haven't crossed over at all yet. Then the different levels. But when I see someone that's really high up there, they're always in a white robe and they have a gold, waistband and light beams behind them. It doesn't matter how they passed, but I always know where they're higher up in level based on the amount of light behind them and based on this white robe that they're wearing. Does anything in your experience connect with a certain level with this type of attire?
They become, I would say, they become more translucent, lucent, and brighter.
Yeah.
That's what I experience.
But
Yeah.
Marissa, what you see is your symbol for things, just as I see, if I meet somebody and I see them kind of in a brown robe and they're kind of dirty looking, I know immediately that that life is my life in Antioch, Turkey. And it's
Mm.
the same with all of my different lives. I associate them with certain things. And Stephen just asked if he could ask us about how many years we've had in between lives.
Oh, that's a great question.
As many as 900 and as short as I was Carla's child and I was my own father.
So how many I mean, from what I know, from what I can only compare it, and my interest is like, wow, this all kind of like you guys are coming from a much different place, and I love when things merge and make sense because then it
Mhm.
kind of validates my experience with something I can't prove that's happening. Um, I heard in the past that the general rule is around 75 to 100 earth years, but it could be sooner, could be, a year. But is that a general rule, or is it very
Um,
different?
there is usually some
cycle.
period of atonement, and if this makes sense, because we return in soul groups,
Hmm.
there needs to be a period of time. Now you know this, Marissa. You connect with people's parents that have died,
Hmm.
so there has to be a period of time that they're up there, easy to connect with, or you're connecting with some part of them that's still there. So there's that period of time, but it's really about that you have to cycle back through with those same people. And so an example is if you commit suicide, you're going to have a longer time between lives because you got to wait till all those people that you were with die and return again.
The people that you have karma with, if you died at 20 and they die at 80, you have to wait until they die to come back together to repair the karma you created.
Hmm.
So the times vary.
Yeah.
So somebody can't pass away and then come back through somebody else in the family as an infant?
Yes, it does happen.
Yes, they can. And in fact, that happened to us in one set of lives. And it's also interesting because this is another thing that Isabella has given us an example of. We frequently notice in families where, like, I'll give you an example, alcoholism exists.
Yes.
So if you were an alcoholic and you raised your child as an alcoholic, it would not be surprising that you returned in that same family line in a life or two so that you would experience what it's like to have an alcoholic father. Because someone has to be the first one to break the cycle and make the loving choice.
So if you are in this life and you make the choice to break the cycle while on the earth plane of all the generations, what does that mean for the person who breaks it?
That means that they don't have the karma, and if they teach their father, let's say for example, that and stand up to the father and say, you have to go to AA and I'm not going to drink and we're going to do that, potentially you start to fix the entire karma for the entire family.
But what if the other people don't want to get sober? What if there's only one person in the family who decides to do that and then carries out that for their children, but the rest of the family soul group that's here on the earth plane doesn't get sober, but that person tries to get them sober?
Then they're going to return again till they learn that lesson.
Who is?
The ones who did not stop the behavior. So if you're still alcoholic and you're still and you abuse your children, you're going to return trying to break that cycle. Now,
yeah, it's interesting because I did a lot of work with mediums tend to bring in certain themes, like certain spirits are connected to certain mediums, and mine were young men, young boys who have passive addiction. So I have a lot of history of connecting families in recovery and this sort of thing. And I almost lost my train of thought here, but
there's a lot of healing to go with that, though, right?
Yeah, but the soul contract of addiction, from what I have seen, it's like when people come here with that contract, it's such a difficult contract that they can really affect such a huge impact positively on the world or immense destruction that if they actually graduate the contract, they move up more levels on the other side, like let's say 5 levels than just the average person,
right?
Because it's such a difficult contract. That's kind of how I understand it.
Okay. And Isabella would probably tell me that all of life is adversity. So every time you overcome, you move up.
Mm-hmm.
And so if the adversity is harder, I can see where your theory would go, that there'd be more to move up.
Yeah, just because not a lot of people make it with that. Right. You know what I mean?
Because it's hard to break that cycle.
Right.
And I'll give you an example because I have a friend whose daughter died of an overdose. And doing the regressions and talking to Isabella about that, sometimes it can be left, we talk about slave and slave owner. Sometimes the addiction is another form of slavery.
Right. Yeah, you're trapped in your own body.
Yes.
Yeah.
So those all are the forms of things that can cause you to get to this position.
So his best friend's daughter that died of an overdose, she was enslaved to drugs throughout her years, and she died in her 30s.
Right.
But she had been a slave owner in a previous life. Okay. So it's not always black and white. It's not always that easy.
I see. Yeah. Right. So it's kind of could be symbolic and
it can be symbolic. Yeah. Because it's not all black and white. Life is really very gray.
Yeah.
And the choice, everything depends on your choice and your free will.
Right.
Again, that comes back to love. If you don't have free will, you can't love.
And you know what? I have to say, we're already over time. And I am not done with you guys. I'm not done with this conversation. Our audience is loving this and how deep we are going here. So I would love to have you guys return again. Kind of a past life return again to the show.
Yes, right. It always recycles.
And because there's so much I did not get to ask you that I wanted to get into. And our audience is just loving every moment of this conversation. So before we do go, I look at everybody. Look at what everybody's saying. This is awesome. This is so interesting. This is fascinating. Please return. Fascinating. I mean, they love it. Love it. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how to get in touch with you guys. And I will, you are coming back. I will bring you back on the show because there's so much I didn't get to ask. Hopefully you accept my invitation.
It would be our pleasure.
We'd love to.
So let me just go over this is Carla and Dave, The Gift of Past Lives, their website, thegiftofpastlives.com. And this will all be in the description. You guys can watch the show. It's pretty easy to remember. Their Facebook page is Mother Isabella, God, and Elizabeth. So if you want to follow their Facebook page. Now, there's a little promo. Of course, there's always a promo with the lounge and our lounge nights, as we call them. Love their promos. So the first 2 people that send an email that you get Dave and Carla's book, The Gift of Past Lives, and you have to mention what happens to Ruby and JJ. I feel like this is like a little mission. This is cute, cool. Will receive another book as a gift. And you have to mention the lounge, but you have to read the book. And then this is like the key little phrase. You have to let them know that you know what happened. And if you go to their website and email them, The Gift of Past Lives, and they have a number of books that you can buy. And I'm going to get one. I'm going to get some books too. And we're going to have them on again because this has just been more than I expected. And I just can go another 3 hours, but we can't do that on the stream. And I want to leave everybody excited for more. So please, we're going to bring you guys back very soon in the next, maybe in July, and have you come back on. So I'm very excited. I'm sure everybody has a lot of questions. And because everything was so deep and so fascinating, people are just in listening mode. So part 2 is to be continued.
So,
thank you so much for coming
part 2,
on.
we'll talk about the fact that there was one time when Carla killed me.
Okay, so that's a cliffhanger for sure. No pun intended. I guess Carla killed Dave before, and now they're married. So we got to find out about that. What that's about. So Maria says, so interesting. Can't wait to see them again. So this is a true lounge. This is a true fireside chat. And I feel like we're in each other's living room and just like having this amazing spiritual conversation that could go on till 3 a.m. Obviously we can't. So we do have to end here tonight. Thank you all for coming to the lounge. I'm going to post the replay. If you're just joining us, you can see this on YouTube, on Facebook. Make sure that you subscribe to this YouTube channel so that you're getting all of our updates and that you're getting all of, when Dave and Carla come back again, you're getting notified and liking our Facebook page. So we will be seeing you guys again. Thank you so much for coming on. And everybody, Dave and Carla. And once again, please visit their website, giftofpastlives.com. Thank you guys so much. And everybody have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. See you later. See you soon.